Uh, Welcome everyone. Just a quick run through the agenda. I'm Jenny Evans. I'm Research Environment and Scholarly Communications Lead at the University of Westminster, based in London, in the UK. This has kind of come from, well, it's come from me and a collaboration with Adam and then Andrew to set up this group. So that's our meeting agenda today. We'll do some introductions using WooClap, which Andrew will talk about. So unless actually, Andrew, Adam, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself just so people know that the two people helping out with this session?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrew Hoffman. I work in research data management at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Yeah, and it's great to be here with you all. I guess part of the inroads of my own interest here is I work both at the Center for Science and Technology Studies that is deeply invested in rethinking questions of scholarly evaluation. And I also work in an anthropology department with researchers, many of whom work with multimodal and artistic and audiovisual methods. So this is kind of squarely in the wheelhouse of what I do on my day-to-day basis with the people who I mostly work with in a support capacity.
Hi, and I'm Dr. Adam Viles-Moore. I work at JISC in the UK. I'm officially the product specialist for persistent identifiers at JISC. I also work on research outputs and infrastructure across broadly higher education. I'm also a hypertext poet, which is part of the reason for my interest in this particular thing, where it's almost impossible to get that kind of stuff properly catalogued, acknowledged, and stored and made available. And looking forward to the session then, everyone. Hi.
Cool. Thank you both. So you will get a chance to do some introductions via the WooClap. Otherwise, we figured we might be here for the first 20 minutes doing introductions.
Although there are only 14 out of the 30
true.
that we're going to be here, so it could, in principle, be manageable.
Yes.
But I think, hopefully we'll have an engaging discussion and people can introduce themselves via the things that they feel passionate enough to speak up about today. So let's see how our WooClap goes. We sort of zoomed through this, but this will be in the notes for you to peruse if you're curious about all the details of the prehistory. And just, Jenny, do you want to just...
Yeah, so I think just briefly just to say, so we've gone from NTRO lens across to creative practice, and then we've ended up back at non-traditional research outputs. That seems to be the space that we're getting most engagement from. So that's why that's gone back and forth a bit. And really, we're now in a much stronger position in that thanks to all of that work we've developed a draft case statement. And we want to actually, I think the other thing to say that's come out of those previous RDA conversations is that an interest group became the most appropriate RDA mechanism for us to move forward with. So that's why we're proposing an interest group, although we're quite open to people's comments about that amongst everything else. This is really this work we've put together as a team of three, but we want to engage with all of you and get your inputs. What we are very mindful of is that the deadline for the Brisbane plenary is the 15th of April. So we don't have a huge amount of time to get feedback and get that draft proposal in mid next week. So please do add comments to the draft statement of work, add comments to the Google Doc, and please do answer our questions and engage. This is, we've had our chance to have our say thus far. This is your chance as community to input. And then we would aim to do some building momentum throughout the next few months, and then aim to have our first interest group meeting in Brisbane and online. Oh, plenary deadline has been extended. Oh, Lise, thank you. That's just made me feel so much better. Much appreciated. So there's a slightly less stressful timeline there, which is good. So yeah, I think over to Andrew now to pick up the next section.
Yeah. So if you will kindly please navigate to wooclap.com and you can enter the event code infra for NTROs. I posted the link also in the chat. It should be the same link. And if not, please do let me know if you're having any issues accessing the WooClap. I think as a controller, I'm not going to answer these questions, so you probably won't see me represented there, but I'm elsewhere here. Okay, so a couple of very quick, and by quick, I mean everyone has 45 seconds to answer the next two questions, 45 seconds each. What country or countries do you work in? Internationally. All right, so we see Europe, UK is in the middle, France, strong representation. I'm not sure what operates is, but I imagine someone tried to enter a sentence and WooClap parsed it in some way. Australia, great. Welcome. What time is it in Australia right now? Geez. Okay, well, this is good to know. Thank you. And to get a sense of what everyone is doing that may have led you here today, what your job title or role or function or any version of that question.
Yeah, did I mention non-traditional research outputs? Yeah, so that's the NTROs, just reminding us of that if you've not come across it before.
Data manager, project manager, research transparency.
So words, data.
Data, lots of data workers.
Lots of data workers.
We do have a professor, data steward and researcher, so that's interesting that we have not just data workers, but also perhaps people who work with data, if we can make that distinction. Did anybody not get a chance to respond in those 45 seconds? If you haven't gotten a chance, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Great. So again, now we have a sense of where people are generally coming from, both in terms of geography and what you might be doing 9 to 5. Now we're going to get into some questions about the scope of this possible interest group. So the question here is, what non-traditional outputs or data types matter most to you? And I'm not sure which part of the screen you can actually see, but there was a bit of a qualification here where I said this could be outputs or data that you yourself work directly with in case that you're a researcher or working with data in other ways or outputs in other ways, or that you encounter when providing support to researchers. And again, if there's some way that you don't quite see yourself or fit into this question, we are curious to know that. So you can either chime in the chat or speak up as you wish. Let's see. Oh, geez. There it is. Are you all seeing the responses?
Yeah, they're coming in now.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
A bit of a pause on that side, but we're all good again.
Time-based media, archaeology, hypertext, literature, qualitative quote-unquote data. Images, voices. Yes. Cool. We'll give it a few more seconds.
Lovely to see the word provenance in there.
I may have used, I'm at the Fiesole, or have been at the Fiesole retreat this week, and I certainly mentioned provenance a couple of times.
All right, results are slowing down, so we'll move on to the next slide. I'll give it 10 more seconds or so to enter what you would like. Everything that. We're not just going to ask you questions and then look at answers pop up on a screen for the whole time, I promise. We will also engage, but we're not there just yet. Okay, moving on. Thinking about what you've put there, what makes what you've put there non-traditional? You don't have to, if you put 5 things, you don't have to answer this question for all 5, but you are more than welcome. Already an interesting mix of responses so far.
See, some of these things are actually kind of feeding into each other, not easily citable,
Yeah.
no disciplinary repository defined as other mixed groups creation.
Lack of visibility. Not published by major journals. Representing them state is difficult. Contributorship. Who's created them?
And, very much feel free to vent into this slide.
Yeah,
very kind of frustrations that people have felt whenever they have to do. I've got this amazing piece of research. You'd like a PDF of it, okay?
Yes, we are all very much here because of our frustrations in this space.
Yeah, I think we even have a next slide possibly about that. So I'll give 10 more seconds in case anyone was in the middle of typing out. By the way, if you see something that you relate to, or if you have something that you feel strongly about that you want to really sort of highlight here, please, by all means, speak up. Otherwise, I think it's nevertheless interesting to read the results as they do come in. Okay, so let's actually not go there yet. I think we'll come back to this one. This next question, I'm curious to. I haven't actually looked at what it looks like from the user side, and I now realize maybe I forgot to turn the clock off on this, so I might have to go back in and turn it off. But the question here is thinking about these non-traditional research outputs that matter most to you, including those that you've probably put in previous slides. Are there things that you or researchers that you work with would like to be able to do with these outputs, but where where there's currently obstacles to doing so? And so this is sort of a fill in the blank sentence, which you should be able to see, and if not, I'm sorry. So 1 in the sentence is the activity you'd like to do or to carry out. 2 is the output or data type that you are working with in this case, and 3 is the obstacle that you envision or have experienced that is in the way of successfully doing what you would like to do. Of course, this is probably one of the most complicated questions and the only one I forgot to turn the timer off for, but I'll just keep resetting it.
Cool. yeah, I'm intrigued to see how this will display once people start.
I've never used the fill in the blank thing before, actually, so this is a real experiment. Thank you for coming along with us.
Yes, we will share all of these notes in the Google Docs after the session, just to reassure you all.
I'm not sure that this is going to actually display in the way that I was hoping it would display.
I think you've just got to read it. I think maybe you've just got to read it across and it works. I think number one.
I would like to understand with idea. No, this is not what I was anticipating. So we might actually have to turn this out to the audience and engage in a human to human way. I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm sorry that the experiment has failed.
I think that's great though. Let's do that, because then it gives people a chance to say hello, introduce themselves if you're happy to do so, and maybe have a quick chat through what you.
I see Neil has already
Neil.
chimed in. So Neil, if you're able to use your microphone, you've volunteered yourself to be the first victim.
Yeah, so I've said I would like to do a better job of understanding what my organization's research produces that is reusable by others, which primarily what we're trying to do is for data sets, but I realize that's not a really non-traditional research output. But basically for us, a non-traditional research output is anything that's not a paper or a monograph. But we're currently unable to do this because our researchers aren't even recording this, even though there are institutional policies to say that they should. So the information we have is poor quality and incomplete.
And do you have knowledge or experiences with folks who actually are working with what we are calling non-traditional types of outputs and data, and if there are sort of particular challenges beyond the standard challenge of just getting people to put things in a place?
Yeah, there's all sorts of them. So I'm part of our university's non-traditional outputs working group, and so we've got some things. So we have a College of Art, for instance, and they've got some really interesting challenges with physical art, but with digital art, the challenges of where you might publish it, where you might store it, how you describe it are all difficult because it's well understood within one community, but it's not well understood across the broader community. And then you've got other things like software, which is the thing I most often represent, where it's utilized across lots of different research areas, but there isn't necessarily a similar practice between them all, even though a lot of the standards are the same.
Great. I saw someone else maybe mention software. Amy? And I see.
Yes, I did. I mentioned software.
Are your challenges aligned with what Neil said, or are there
Absolutely
we're thinking about?
Very closely aligned. The digital objects are still, if they're not an article or a proceeding, there aren't metrics around them that are widely recognized or that are accepted by promotion and tenure processes or other facilities. The best we get is you can list them in your bio when you go up for a grant, but maybe not. So yeah.
Great, thanks.
I see that Kira's got her hand up.
Yeah,
Kira.
Hi. Yeah, I'm at Cambridge University Press, and I would love to be able to reach out to, 2/3 of our journals publish humanities and social sciences content, and trying to get them to understand that a lot of the information they collect can be considered data, can be useful to share. I wish I could reach out and do better and work with them more closely to encourage them to share this information as much as possible. And I also was going to say something similar to what Amy said, that yeah, data is still very much considered a non-traditional research output. It's not getting cited, it's not getting factored into, hiring decisions. I mean, we have Dora and we have Quora to try and support better recognition of these sorts of outputs, but even data is nowhere near there yet. So for the other non-traditional research outputs, we've got a long road ahead, I think.
I think that's a really interesting point, that we have some progress with some of the things, but even like kind of looking at the journey on those things like software, which has a couple of proposed PID schema and some other bits and pieces going around it, it's still a lot way ahead of a lot of the other kind of things, which you would have a lot of arguments about whether or not they're even data with the practitioners that are producing them, which is always exciting. Andrea. Sorry.
I believe that Amy is before me.
I do apologize, I couldn't see the hand.
Okay.
No, I already talked once. Go ahead. I'll talk after you.
Okay. Yeah, Andrea from DMP Online, so University of Edinburgh. My perspective is how this is going to impact the data management plan, which is a part that I'm more interesting, and also software management plan, where the SSI has been quite active on this task. So it's quite challenging also from my side in terms of software, how we develop and how we aggregate also this information inside the plans.
Great, thanks. Amy?
Yeah, thanks for letting me go again. Hi, my name is Amy Nernberger. I'm at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology as the program head for data management services. I'm also the co-chair of the RDA interest group on evaluation of research. So this really closely intersects this non-traditional research objects and outputs has been a topic of conversation in our group as well, and thinking about how that plays into the evaluation of research. This is why my comment was about thinking about how these research outputs are considered within the careers, not just of the PI, who is like producing the research object, but if we look at software, if we look at data, if we look at so many of these other non-traditional research outputs, the number of people and contributors who are part of the production of that, who also deserve credit in these spaces for this type of work. And I think this is an aspect of the non-traditional research output that someone else had mentioned in one of the comments, that they're coming from such a different collective than we're used to thinking about as the author or the small group of authors around research.
Gabby?
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
Gabriela Pino, Gaby Pino from Costa Rica, from Universidad Nacional. Well, I agree with everything that everybody has said, because it applies to us in the same way. And I think there's an issue of equity in what we just said, because when data exposure, or when data becomes some of the factors that make the researchers and the institution expose their products and what they do, when you have data that cannot be created or cannot be put to the service of the public, that becomes it's a problem of equity, because there are people that will get much more evaluate, that would get much more degrees, that will get a much more recognition, because they have that data that can be created in the traditional way. As everybody says, is mostly is something that is in a paper or something that you can publish. And all the other people that work as much and that have the merit to all the work and knowledge creation is not there. you cannot see them. You cannot expose them as part of the university or as part of the knowledge creation of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Again, yeah. And I certainly think the recognition of that domain expertise is equally valid, because without it, there would be less research integrity around research. There all of these openness around contributorship, as Adam's pointed out in the chat. And you know, I think the thing is that there are mechanisms to do some of these things out there. The problem for these communities is that they're not granular enough. And I'm not saying that we need to have a credit taxonomy that lists 65 different types of contributorship, but certainly the work we've done, we've looked at that idea of creator and collaborator and participant, and getting getting those broader roles recognized, because they are different but equally valid.
Please.
Yeah, hi everyone. My comment is actually building on the last three, just a case study of those coming together. And I'm sorry, Andrew, you just heard the story last Friday. So I'm supporting this research collective who is doing participative action research, and they have all these outputs that they co-create in citizen labs, and so this question of how, you know, who the creator here is, how do you attribute the contribution of everyone involved. Also because some of those spaces, they're actually really open spaces. So one of them is in a train station, and people come and go and can contribute to the research project by adding to, you know, a physical model that they're building there. So, you know, this question of non-traditional also research methods, perhaps, and how those interact with the outputs from this process, and how do you manage those outputs. Those are the ones that I also try to distill in a very convoluted sentence into this fill in the blanks, but yeah.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I think that's actually, that comes back to why we were using this practice research lens, because that was thinking more about methods. But I wonder whether, and that this is just an idea to throw out there, whether actually it should be an NTR methods and outputs group rather than simply just the outputs. Just a thought.
And Lee's thinking about what we did talk about last week. I think there's something that you also didn't say yet, if I may, which is where these things end up, right? Or maybe I was reading that into what you were saying.
No, you didn't. I mean, my sentence here that I typed in was, I would like to do archiving with co-created physical models, but I'm currently unable to do this because of unclear how to, basically. So yeah, how do you preserve those as well? I mean, you can take digital photos, I guess, but is that really preserving it? Is the question. The researchers tell me that it's not. So
yeah, and I think that's really part of the ongoing discussions that I think we're focusing in on, is that there's things from the researchers which basically say, well, this isn't the actual research, this is a 2 degrees separated proxy, and you know, the work towards actually having the parity of esteem of those actual outputs and being able to record and characterize and address them is really important.
I mean, thinking back, I see your hand up, Kira, but I'm going to jump in because thinking back to the initial sort of outputs that matter question, I think I saw someone mention something about time-bound activities or something to that effect. If that person's still on the call and hasn't spoken yet, I'd be curious to hear if this most recent part of the conversation tracks with what you're thinking in terms of time-bound activities. If not, we can come back to that. We've logged the output type as a thing that's important anyway. So Kira?
Yeah, sort of a follow-on from what I've said in the chat is that we have these Cambridge Data Champions forums every 2 months. And at the last one, there was a really interesting presentation from someone who's been running workshops at Cambridge University for lab technicians, basically, to tell them, well, here's how you can advocate for yourself to be included as a contributor or an author on papers because you've made a valuable contribution to the research. And I think that, I mean, not to try and dilute the focus of this group further, but if we're talking about non-traditional research outputs and methods, we should probably also be thinking about non-traditional contributors to research, people who are, yeah, lab technicians, various other roles that are not traditionally recognized as actually making solid contributions to research when, I mean, I was a chemistry researcher. We would never have been able to survive without our lab technicians, so maybe reaching out to people who have not considered themselves researchers or contributors to research necessarily, but making sure that those sorts of roles and those sorts of people are included and the contributions that they make are understood as research outputs and contributions to research outputs. But that might be stretching the scope of this group a bit too far.
I actually think it's at the kernel, maybe even of where this group started, which I was not around for at that time, but I know Jenny mentioned, something about the credit ontology and how granular do you go? But I think that was Jenny. You can speak to this way better, and Adam also better than I can, in terms of what your thinking was about this in the earlier BoFs around these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think honestly, the whole premise behind the work I've been leading in the UK has been around the fact that I'm a librarian and I was the PI on the project, and actually the project members of the team, yes, they were discipline experts, but there was a research data manager, a repository manager, so for me those technician roles absolutely are key here. And I think what's tricky about how the group is framed in the proposal is actually spelling some of that out right at the beginning, and how much needs to be in the title itself, because I think contributorship, outputs, process, all of that is part of this, and certainly from an open research perspective and recognizing from a research culture perspective, which I know is much more of a UK discussion, but that's really important, and it's part of the problem, because actually, yeah, your technician might create that non-traditional research output that is core to the outcomes.
Like if I could I'm trying to remember who it was, but
yeah,
I think it was at the LIBA conference last July, Northern Hemisphere summer. I saw a poster about someone had assessed how do you think about different kinds of research or contributions to progress of science, basically. And it had things like, YouTube educational videos as contributing to progress in research and science. I'll see if I can dig it up. I don't know if anyone else, if that twigs anyone else's memory, but I definitely took a photo of the poster because it was really interesting in terms of different kinds of outputs being recognized, teaching and things that researchers do.
I see Beth chimed in the chat, who was the person who talked about time-based media in the earlier slide that I referenced. And Beth says she considers this type of output to be experiential, composed of components that need to be saved along with the informational aspects, like an installation in an art gallery, and that these are outputs that are recognized in cultural heritage as research outputs and typically document extensively with still photography and written records. I'm hesitant to ask a follow-up question because I don't know how preoccupied you are, Beth, but if I were to ask a follow-up question, it would be something like, is this a sort of model that we can think with for other domains, or are there actually challenges even within this sort of situation that you describe here, that would be relevant for a group like this to address? And feel free to chime in verbally or in text whenever you get the chance. Does anyone have, did we miss any important, I'm trying to take some notes and follow the conversation in the chat, but did we?
Yeah, I'm watching the chat. So yes, I think Neil's mentioned the Hidden Ref initiative in the UK. Yeah, we're well aware of that, Neil, in terms of an organising group, but yeah, worth referencing. I think for me, that's why this group is so important, because there are a number of different conversations happening around the place, but actually what's missing at the moment is the infrastructure to enable change. So that's good.
I don't know if that's a pitch to go to. I think we have a question about this, if I remember correctly. Let's see what our
no
yeah.
worries, Beth. We've just seen the comment about text is easier with the hammering. No worries.
So maybe this gets to some of what you were just mentioning, Jenny. If we are thinking about an interest group focused on infrastructure for non-traditional research outputs, given the challenges we have heard and the outputs that we've seen so far, what or where are the most significant gaps in the existing infrastructural landscape as far as you have experienced or seen or are concerned about? Thank you, Gabby. Data viz. Standards. Existing at all. I feel like the answers are coming less quickly than they have previously.
I think some people like me might have lost the screen. So I'll just stick the link in the chat again.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That is the challenge, is having all the links going constantly.
Yeah, and thanks for that image in the chat as well, Kira. That's really interesting.
And I see Beth also followed up to say that there's problems in combining the archival records with other data, but maybe that's a qualitative data problem generally.
The link to the book club's in the meeting chat.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, I think that ways to measure impact is a really interesting one, because it's certainly the ad hoc or the anecdotal is probably a better word. Feedback I'm hearing from discipline communities is, yeah, but if you start capturing it, I don't want you to measure just what you're capturing, because and that's certainly the work we've done around narrative has proved that actually it's not just about these individual files and outputs, it's about how the connections between them and the story.
And I think, yeah, building on that, one of the things that I've seen reflected is that, well, that is a nice bit. Well, if we start capturing them, then they will be part of the evaluation measurement. And I don't think that the way they're currently captured or characterized will in any way benefit my kind of assessment, role progression, and so on. And I think that that's a really interesting point of view. Again, these kind of like creations of proxies don't necessarily reflect the actual outputs and the practice and all the other bits that go into it. And I think for kind of like evaluation of research, having something which is prima facie, I can't believe I said that out loud, the actual kind of research output and the effort and the contributorship around it is really important if we are then creating those as part of a thing to be in a process that evaluates the research itself.
I think this most recent thing that showed up is quite interesting. The practices and incentives for making non-traditional research outputs visible aren't enough for the majority of people doing research to care or to benefit. I'm wondering if the person who added that comment is able to speak up a bit about that. I see Neil, your hand is raised. Perhaps that was you.
Yeah, that was me. So so a lot of the work we've done with communities, there are definitely people who are interested in changing things around non-traditional research outputs and are doing an amazing job of basically fighting the good fight to put things into systems, to make things more visible, to make things more reusable. But that's not really the set of people that we are trying to change here. It's the next set down. The people who are interested but don't have the time, effort, resources, guidance, incentives, and so on. And I think the thing that we found challenging is across a wide set of different non-traditional research outputs, we haven't found enough that tips them over the balance to making it easy or making it beneficial for them to do. And therefore, we're in this cycle of it's only ever a small proportion of the community that really does something in the area. I think it's tied to other things that people have put in. Things around promotion and hiring is a really big one, and then I see a lot of other things of just kind of people have put in understanding ways of measuring, where if we don't understand how to do that, we can't really tell if we're providing enough benefit. It becomes kind of like a self-fulfilling cycle. If we don't understand how to measure if we are having a benefit, then we can't have a benefit. So yeah, some really interesting responses here.
Just want to say I completely agree. I'd put in incentive/recognition, which is you phrase it a lot more eloquently, Neil. But yeah, I think that's a big part of the gaps is, again, people who, if they had all the time and resources in the world, would love to do better in terms of sharing and making non-traditional research outputs available, but they don't. And so they're going to prioritize what's going to be most valuable to, their career, their promotion. So it does come back to the evaluation of research, and Amy's group there.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd say though is that there's no, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's definitely 3 days of conference. I'm a bit tired. The problem at the moment is that there's no easy way to do it, and actually there's no infrastructure, but also we know every single repository, and this is very UK focused in terms of context, but every single repository and research management system has a different way of doing this, and each institution is kind of creating its own kind of way of doing it. So part of the problem here is that you couldn't even say to a researcher, oh, you can do it this way in this university. They'll get to the next one, or they'll go to a museum or a gallery, or library, or archive employer, and it will be different there as well. So I think that's why this group is so important, is actually, this is not a scenario that's going to be resolved overnight. It's a 10-year plus kind of culture change piece, that journey that we're on to try and getting some kind of better standards will begin to make it a bit easier and help some of the things people are mentioning.
And then, sorry, and then alongside that, we also have the issues that the way that people expose stuff from those individual repositories are things like the persistent identifiers, like the DOIs and the ORCID records and things like that, where they sit as other, so that even if you have starting to get, more advanced file types, that doesn't address the kind of underlying things we've already discussed about how these are, not actually capturing what the actual output of the research is, what the process and practice is. So even if we can work on the kind of approaches within capture, then that needs to be alongside the way that these things are kind of part of the global ecosystem of the academe. See, that's a big word I didn't think I'd say today. Andrew, sorry.
No, this is, I think, a continuation. I see a couple of other things here. So there's capacity, and then we have a comment about the time of experts / pairs. And there was another one, but things are jumping around. And then there was a comment about infrastructure existing at all. So I was interested in probing all three of those, perhaps starting with the the time of experts and pairs, and this question of capacity, and if the person who contributed these, or people who contributed these, are willing to speak a bit more to this. So if we talk about the time of experts, I'm not sure what pairs means in this particular case. So what kind of experts are we talking about? Whose time?
Anne Cambon here from France. I wrote about the time of experts, and that was related to the evaluation aspect. You need to know and to have the time to get into these outputs that are not classical. And there are not many experts who actually do that or can do that. So that might be one of the aspects, not to take these outputs into account because they are more difficult to assess than other kind of outputs. That was what I had in mind.
Great, thanks. And is that the same as what you were thinking about, whomever put capacity, or was there something additional about that?
Well, I don't know who made the
Yeah,
capacity.
that was for the person who had included that.
That's from me. So it was a general remark on the capacity, not only for the researchers, but on every aspect of publishing data. The whole system, I think, is understaffed already. And if we want to add the non-traditional parts, so everyone is enthusiastic or willing at least, but it's really difficult. There are other priorities. So that was the background for my capacity.
Yeah, and I think that for me, one of the many reasons I'm here today is the saving people time, and there is a tension around capturing what might be perceived as yet more things, but actually if the system works better for these communities, then actually it will be easier for them to capture these outputs and then be visible.
Yeah, maybe a short answer to that. That's also what we are currently doing, speaking of supporting the IPCC assessment report, the next one. And one of the real most important parts is to support the authors in providing all the requested information without burdening them too much. So we are talking to tool providers. So it's really something which is important to target at. What we develop should make the life easier for the researcher, but also maybe for editors or someone who's coming in the line at the next step.
Yes, and I think actually skills hasn't particularly come up today as well, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario in that without the infrastructure, it's a bit hard to talk about skills. But I mean, there are certain things I guess people can do now if they know about it. But yeah, better infrastructure will mean the skills that are lacking are a bit clearer but also win people over. I mean, it's very, I've said this in many public forums, I still struggle to advocate for ORCIDs for some of my community, because actually if they publish journal articles, fine, but anything else, it's just going to be painful, and it's going to be messy because it's just still doesn't really understand what they do.
Since I didn't contribute anything here, I'm curious if folks here are working with people who work with sort of non-textual data. outputs, materials. Like I said in my own personal introduction, some of what drove me into this space was many unanswered questions from folks who are working with film and with other sort of audiovisual recordings. Are there any folks on the call today who are working with communities specifically with these sorts of output types? DRI folks are working with film. Great. Again, I'll avoid engaging in too much depth, Beth. So maybe we can follow up at another time when you have less hammering in your midst. Anyone else? All right. Just looking at the time, we have 35 minutes left, and we still have several slides to go, plus about 40 minutes of actually looking at the draft statement of work that we prepared, which we were fully prepared to dispense with, because for us, this is sort of the more relevant conversation in terms of understanding what the community is thinking and how this sort of interest group could be scoped, which, as we've seen today, can be scoped in many different ways. So this is all super interesting and relevant for what we'll be doing next. Thanks, Neil. I'm registering your comment and moving on to the next question, which is, what individuals or organizations or entities would you like to or need to work with in order to address sort of this vast set of obstacles we've now basically been talking around for most of the time today? We have another question about sort of what we've left out. So if there's people who you would like to work with who don't necessarily show up at RDA, this is also, I think, especially interesting. And again, we can sort of come back to this in a later slide as well. So I see Kira says we collaborate closely with the qualitative data repository at Syracuse, and they look at a lot of qualitative data types. Kira, do you have a sense of, I mean, qualitative data is a fairly broad category.
It is, yeah.
So, and this is also something I struggle with in my own work, because I deal with a lot of qualitative researchers, and then within that group, there's, you know, the people who trade in, I guess, what we've come to call non-textual outputs or non-textual data. Do you have sort of any interactions, experiences with QDR specifically beyond field notes or interviews or, you know, these kinds of things?
Yeah, not so much really, but we do have a bunch of humanities and social science journals that do think about things like, you know, video recordings and, you know, non-textual, well, things that I would call data and they usually wouldn't, but, you know, photos of archaeological sites, things like that are definitely, I've just put a link in the chat about where the QDR has a list of examples of qualitative data. Which, skimming through it now, it does look, it's mostly textual stuff, but yeah, I think things like maps and photos of physical samples and all that sort of thing, yeah, are definitely types of, well, data materials that come up.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I've seen QDR. I think they do really cool and valuable stuff. I'm making sure, 1 second. I've lost my own screen now. So we see industry and funders and scholarly societies, research performing institution administrators, editors, researchers, publishers, tool framework providers. Let's see. Sorry, my brain is reaching 5 p.m. here in the Netherlands. It's just
You're
There's
doing
always-
great. Thanks.
Always
Thanks,
getting
Andrea.
into sketchy territory after the week that I've had. Not to say that none of us have had long weeks, but being creative on the fly becomes more and more challenging once I hit the 4 o'clock hour. I see something about administrators. I'm wondering what that comment has behind it and the ways in which you would envision working with administrators around this stuff.
Hi, that's me. To me, often the root of some of these challenges, why we don't have infrastructure around these types of outputs, is because they aren't valued at the same level for as a research output, as a work in and of itself, and to resituate, to relocate that sense of value within a research performing organization, to create those structures, to allocate the money to many of these other places, whether it's the archives, whether it's the professionals working with these, requires that activity from administrators. We need to convince them that these objects do have value, where they deserve investment around them. And working at it from that angle as well, because this then can feed into how promotion and tenure processes work within that organization, as well as how research itself is considered within the organization. So thinking, again, as we've often said about data, that data is one of the most valuable things that a research performing institution produces. These non-traditional research outputs are also valuable things that the institution produces. And if the institution valued them as such, they would certainly invest in their care, keeping, findability, reusability, all those types of things that we're talking about when we're talking about how do we create value in systems that can recognize what these objects are and how they're considered within that overall scholarly situation.
Great. So not necessarily, I mean, I guess that's sort of a combination of working directly with, but also advocacy through those sorts of relations, it sounds like.
Advocacy, championship, yep.
Yeah. I see editors in here. Oh, sorry, Andrea, please.
Here we go. The camera is not working. I don't know. Oh, yeah. Yes, I'm interested to the answer. Tool framework provider, because I am a framework provider. And I'm more interested in, for the person that wrote tool framework provider, if in somewhere we can help on this.
Is the remarker of tool framework provider willing to speak up here? Thank you, Amy. Hope to be in touch with you.
Yeah, the
fantastic.
framework was again from me. Maybe it's a very specific comment because it's what we are currently doing with the frameworks we have identified, that they can support our ambition, so to say. So it's really one aspect is that these tools are domain specific. So the tool framework is already known by the community. So it's not a general framework, but very specifically for model evaluation. But if these frameworks, which provide some standardization of outputs, so the format, the metadata provenance, if we get some additional information in there, then on the fly, all the requests that we have for a good documentation, for easy archival can be captured. So that's behind the framework, but I would say it's not one that fits all.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting answer.
Andrea, do you yourself have sort of ideas about how a tool like the one you work with, can sort of play in here?
Yes and no. Let me explain. I am absolutely new on this world. I come from a different industry. I come from the financial market. I joined recently to the DMP Online. I'm working on the DCC. For what I understand, there is a lot of good idea across these research scope, I mean, in the environment of research. But Martina said a very good example. Sometimes we wanted to extract the information, or we needed to request the information outside from as a tool for data management plan. I'm trying to revert this idea because data management plan on its own at the moment is the vision is like a static document. Instead, I'm trying to revert this one from a living document, but it's outside of the scope. And then I see a lot of things about attitude management and how I can, and this is an interesting topic for this NRO, how I can integrate my tool with this kind of request, even if it's very specific for the domain. It's very broad as an environment, and I understand, but Martin already gave a very good suggestion for me how I can interrogate or I can pull a request from the system, considering that is very broad.
Cool.
If
Fantastic.
this answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I think I'm just going to step in a bit as chair, just because I think we're starting to get bogged down in quite a lot of detail that maybe we need to step back from for a moment. That was really helpful feedback. Thank you. Just because, Andrew, I think we've got how are we doing in terms of questions, because I really want to get on to the last question or so and then move on. But yeah.
Should we look at aligning and then we can come back to sort of the engagement question?
Yeah, I think so. Let's just keep this one. Perhaps I think for people who hopefully everyone's feeling like they've had a good say today, but if we are missing things or you feel like something hasn't been recorded, please do add
We do have a
notes.
slide. We have a slide for that. There is a poll. So,
yeah. Okay. Cool. So there will
do you
be
want me to
that
go
choice.
there first?
No, I think not. Maybe just if people have those ideas, hold on to them for a few minutes, so that we can record them, just so that we can, because it would be good to have a quick look through the case statement before the end. We've got about 24 minutes to go. So
yeah.
So back to you, Andrew.
So maybe we do a couple of speed rounds here, like 40 seconds each. We're not really gonna go too into depth. These are things for I think us to pick back up on later,
Cool.
but we have our own sense of who we should be engaging with here, but inevitably we have not accounted for everything.
No. That's why we're here today.
I'm glad to see complex citation work group. This was something that we were talking about earlier this week. Okay, we'll do 10 more seconds. Lots of variety here. Okay, we're gonna move on because there's more brain picking that we're gonna be doing. Clearly we have our own set of things that we've thought about, like DataCite and OpenAlex and Crossref, but are there other open community infrastructure providers that you think could be especially relevant to consider in the case of non-traditional research outputs?
Where are the places that if we could make a difference, we could do it both quickly and openly? So where are the places that we can get in?
Much better framing. Thank you, Adam. 10 more seconds. Europeana is interesting to see here. Elixir.
Apologies if people can hear a dog barking in the background. I will mute myself.
I think your noise suppression is working well,
Oh,
Jenny.
great. Oh, that's good, because all I can hear is out the hotel window is a dog barking, but if you can't hear it, I won't worry about it.
All right, we're going to move on. Repository. So we already heard one example, at least from the Syracuse repository. But are there other repositories or digital preservation and software management examples? Adam, do you have a better framing of this also?
Where are the places that we can put stuff, and where should we be influencing how they describe those things so as people can both put them in and get them out more easily? And also, if you've got contributions from either of the previous two and you didn't get around to hitting submit, please put them into the Google Doc notes. Feel free to put them in the chat. We are really grateful for all of the contributions and input that we've had, because at the start, I think we were slightly concerned that we'd just have to spend a lot of time talking. So thank you all so much for the very active participation and engagement you've provided today.
We have no hits so far. Maybe people are running out of steam, or
Yeah,
maybe we've
perhaps.
covered everything that there is to be covered.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Software Heritage Archive. Okay,
Awesome. Thank you.
I'll give 10 more seconds just in case anyone has any last minute thoughts. Zenodo.
Yeah. I think I'd point out that the problem and the challenge that a lot of this content is sitting in websites, or it's sitting in commercial software, YouTube, places like that, and that is part of the problem in this space.
Yeah. Internet Archive, cool. YouTube, very relevant, great. Okay, we're gonna move on. Discipline and community-led consortia. There's another project, another question about projects that you were aware of. So I'm gonna actually just land on here because this is the last bit of these questions. So that could also include community consortia. We can just sort of gather them all together here. So again, we've heard from Jenny and Adam about previous work that really led to what has gathered us here today. But perhaps there's other things that are currently ongoing. I know that we heard some stuff about hidden ref, possibly things attached to that.
Yeah, there's certainly the work that's taken place in Australia around non-traditional research outputs. I've got those references recorders, but probably need to add them into the Google Doc. So that's another one. Yeah, the research catalogue. Very, very aware of that. We spoke to Michael Schwab as part of PR Voices.
You said you said you spoke with the research catalog folks?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I think it's interesting. It goes back to my comment earlier, because that is a fantastic space to share some of this research, but it's getting data in and out. It's we've got all of these spaces that stuff is there, but how do you make it fair if those standards are not embedded?
Yeah.
The work that our colleagues Sanyan and Jane are doing at University of Cape Town, they've done some amazing work as well. And I guess all of this kind of is covered by the PR Voices work. And archives, we know that there's work going on in the archives community, archives records management communities. And I did actually, this conference I've been at this week, we talked a lot about how there's lots of different conversations happening in lots of different communities.
I don't know if you've seen, this is maybe a more local Dutch thing, but there's also this research platform.art that's also used to track similar things. Glam Labs, great. Okay, in the interest of wrapping up, let's, how do we feel about this slide? Should we pause here for a moment?
Yeah, should we throw it back to Adam?
Hey, I think in the interest of time, I will rush straight through this, which says this stuff is really important. But part of the reason that's really important is that, as Jenny said already, it's a culture change piece. It's not just about building technology. It's not about creating standards. It's not about any one of those pieces. It's about joining all of those things up together with all of you guys that are here, with the wider kind of scholarly societies, standards bodies, infrastructure providers, and taking all of those different aspects and creating a change that means that not only is this work valued and an essential part of both the kind of recognition, valorization of the individual researcher, but also of the wider contributors, that it's recognized within the institutions. And we talked again about all of these things, about how they all feed into each other. So the kind of underpinning message of this slide is it takes a village, to quote a well-known aphorism. And we hope that all of you will be interested in being involved in this.
The next slide's probably
please.
more. Oh,
There you
we
go.
lost the other one, did we?
Yeah, I hit it because I thought it was.
Okay, cool. So I think what I would just point out, yeah, is that I think just we've had some conversations around the previous slide around making sure that co-design piece happens. We cannot create infrastructure and impose it on our discipline communities and on our domain communities. It has to be a conversation back and forth. So yeah, and going back to that, that's just reiterating our timelines, although thanks to Lise, we know we've got a little bit more time now, which is great. That's good. And on to the next slide, Andrew. I think, Adam, are you happy to pick this bit up?
Sure. So what we've got is a statement of work, which we will stick the link into the chat and is already in the Google Doc notes. And again, we'd love some more feedback on this. We'd love some kind of checks on like more than just our three voices on where we think this thing should be focused. But what we're proposing is that the creation of an interest group within the RDA structure. Here is a list of bullet points, which you can read in your own time. But I just want to like read out loud the kind of like overall kind of vision mission statement. It's a dedicated space to bring together people interested in improving infrastructure for, I mean, we're using NTROs now after a lot of back and forth, as we've already covered in the meeting earlier, but it's that domain-specific implementations of FAIR principles that reflects the specificities of these fields, right? So it's not so much about open access. It is about this fair approach to the outputs that are underrepresented, undervalorized, have not the same kind of parity as the other kinds of effort, but are every bit equally as valid as research practice, research output, and as a part of kind of the wider landscape of academia. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at is the creation of the focus community space. So this will be something that hopefully we get within RDA as acceptance of the interest group. So there's that, but whatever happens, we will have a space for this conversation to continue. We want to make sure that there are clear terminologies and definitions, and as we've, I think, really covered very well today. That's really important. It's really important that we have some set of agreed terminology. We don't need to have like a totally tight ontology, taxonomy, vocabulary, all of that, but we do need to agree to the kind of like general scope, the kind of things that we're talking about, and so that we're kind of aligned whenever we have discussions in this space. We kind of understand each other, right? And again, that's part of that culture piece. It's part of that kind of like creating a common language around the things, the concerns we have. We need kind of a documentation for this roadmap to FAIR NTROs. I keep wanting to say nitro, and I know that that's not going to help anyone. We map our pure voices schema, and again, we've got the output for the practice research voices, and there's the DOI is in the notes, and I keep saying that as I try to paste it in, but it'll get there in a minute. And like kind of the other thing is really important is those case studies. Again, we don't want to just suggest a thing, create a thing, and say, you know, it's the old kind of build it and they will come. That doesn't work for this stuff. You know, build it and then they will pick it apart brick by brick. We want to create something together that, you know, brings all of the various concerns, facets in a way that we can then move forwards. So the next steps, and here's our call to action bit. I think landing kind of more or less on time. We would like people to contribute to that draft case statement. We want to make sure that we create something within the RDA structure that is a viable platform that is both, you know, addressing a scoped and specific set of needs that people agree on are both a priority and achievable. And then the second thing is to make sure that we have that aspect of your community specific needs, whether that be from a discipline, technology, provider, whatever. And then we go on to the next slide.
So actually there's a couple of maybe final questions.
Yes.
If it's okay if I backtrack to this one.
Yeah, I think so.
And just give folks another few seconds, a minute
Yeah.
to think about
minutes.
if there is anything that we have overlooked today that maybe you were hoping to hear addressed, or that you may have commented even in any of the answers to the slides that we didn't pick up on, that you want to flag for us to consider as we move forward with the interest group proposal. We understand that everyone is tight on time and that you may not have the chance to revisit that proposal. We are happy to transport your comments into it and account as best as we can for them, provided they are generally in the area of where this should be going, according to what RDA at least is looking for. Yeah, any glaring omissions? You can also just speak up. I think everyone's ready for a drink. Regardless of your time zone.
Yeah.
You deserve a drink.
Yeah, be it coffee, water, or something, tea, coffee, water, or something stronger.
So something with more ethanol in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see nothing here. So again, if there's things that come to mind in the meantime, or after this is done, the Google Doc remains open for those contributions. Another thing that we sort of just landed on was like this use of the term non-traditional research outputs, which, as we have an extended footnote in the draft statement of work, basically saying we don't really like this term, and yet this is kind of the main term that is out there in the literature that has some traction and that people do identify with. But, you know, we also dream of a world in which there's a sort of more positive terminology that we can use that doesn't always contrast it against what is supposedly traditional. As we heard today, I mean, there's still strong feelings that data itself can be thought of as non-traditional. So what do we really mean? What is the line between traditional and non-traditional? These kinds of things. So if you have thoughts about that as well, we are always open to alternative phrasings for the kinds of things that we're getting at. I don't see any answers, so
and of course Boschel's son.
What's that? What was that?
Saying, I was just saying Bonjour Stoan, who's going to retire, which is the
okay, sorry.
It's just
Merci beaucoup. Bonne soirée.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point, Neil, and I still do like that practice research lens, just because it's it goes beyond outputs, because you know, certainly the work we've done, it's about process and end product. It's not just about the output at the end of the research. And part of the problem with this entire space and with open research is that if you're going to make process more open, you need to capture it as it happens, not at the end of a research project. So, but yeah, it's practices, outputs, and impact. That's
Expanded research outputs, practices, outputs, and impact.
Yeah.
Next,
That last bit was in response to Jenny. And yeah, so for instance, in the UK, our evaluation has kind of gone beyond outputs to also looking at non-traditional research practices and non-traditional research impacts.
that's great.
Yeah, and that is this as I think I said earlier, that our communities care about impact. That's really what they want to evidence.
I know there's also, like, in the metrics world, there's the whole discussion of next generation metrics. So maybe these are next generation research.
voclab is not working because I put the answer, but I don't see on the screen.
Let's see. Is it not? Huh.
I think you're displaying the question rather than the answers, Andrew.
Oh, maybe that's why.
There you go.
Ah, yeah, it is.
I was
No,
gonna say,
like
it's also 5 p.m. for WooClap, but it's actually just still 5 p.m. for me. Full responsibility. So we have a couple of those expanded
yeah,
research.
that is my suggestion. That is,
Yeah.
I said, why is not working?
Now it's working. You've
working,
registered twice. Thanks, Lise. I think we're sort of at the end here. I will shut up
Yes.
and see
Yes.
to you, Jenny.
Thank you. Fantastic. No, huge thank you to everyone who's joined today. If you're still on the call or not, your engagement is so important to making this work happen. What I would say is that I think, okay, we've got a deadline now of 21st of April. So if you go away and think about other ideas, thoughts, can you please add them to the Google Sheet, the collaborative notes document, because we need to write that up for our DA. So we need a record that people turned up. And that's the other thing, is that we will go away and look at this and then do a review of the case statement. And we'll send it out to you all, those people have given us email addresses, and get some comment with a view to finalising it. We'll still need to finalise it by the end of next week. So we've got a little bit more time, but not much more time. So yeah, so we look forward to making this work, and with your input it becomes even stronger. So I think that's probably about it. Yep, just make sure you put your name, contact details. We will translate the WooClap into the notes documents, and we've got a recording now as well, so hopefully we'll get some interest from other people who weren't able to attend today. And I look forward to working with you all going forwards. I think we've got a good sense of community here today, which is really exciting. I first tried to engage with this idea at RDA in 2019, and no one was interested. So it's fantastic.
Every year we get one more attendee, so it's great. Well,
I think we've got more than one more this time. This one's been exciting. So yeah, I think we're good to finish off a few minutes early.
Thanks for guiding the ship, Jenny.
My pleasure, and thank you, Andrew, for picking up the bulk of the work today in the session. Much appreciated, and nice to see people, and hopefully see some of you in Brisbane. All going well.
Definitely hope to be there. Thank you so much for this,
and some Australian music. Or if Kira and I have any, so
yeah.
Thank you all for your input. Super valuable, and
Yeah.
we'll be in touch.
Fantastic. Cool. Okay.
Have a good night.
Yeah. Enjoy.
Bye-bye, or wherever you are.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
I just wonder, do they